No, it's Are we ready? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the June 25, 2025 meeting of the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency Board of Directors. Ask everyone to please rise and ask Director Perillo to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Place your hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please. Yes.
Yes.
Here.
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 All right, agenda review, any proposed changes?
Yes, Chair, we would recommend that we reverse the order of items 13 and 12, that we take item 13 first, and then go to item 12.
Any objections? Hearing none, we'll rearrange the agenda. Let's move on to public comments. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not otherwise on today's agenda is welcome to come forward and do so at this time. Seeing no movement and hearing no voices, we'll move on to executive officers' comments.
I have no additional comments.
And board member comments, any board member comments at this time? Just one, if I may. I received word last week that Dr. Mike Kelly passed away. As you may recall, Mike served on this board with distinction for many years, and it was with sadness that we heard of his passing after a 10-year struggle with cancer. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, extend our condolences to his family, and honor his service. Thank you. With that, we will move on to the consent agenda. Unless anyone has a question or a comment, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, which includes items 8 and 9.
I'll motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Let's move on then to item number 10 on the agenda.
Good. Okay. Good afternoon, Chairwas, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dr. Farai Kaseke, agency staff, here to present item number 10 on your agenda packet, adopting a resolution, resolution number 2025-3, establishing the rate of the Las Posas Valley Overuse Assessment. The Las Posas Valley adjudication judgment defines overuse as a use in excess of that allowed under the judgment. Each year, water right holders are given an annual allocation, which is the maximum annual amount of allocated groundwater a water right holder may use pursuant to an allocation in a given water year. You can have overuse in three ways. When you use groundwater in excess of the annual allocation granted to a water right holder, or when a mutual water company reports on behalf of its mutual exclusive shareholders an aggregate use that exceeds the aggregate mutual supply. And the third situation is when a mutual water company shareholder without an allocation uses groundwater in the basin. Now, the judgment then also gives a remedy on how to fix this overuse, and they call it the cure of overuse. It's that in the water year following the water year in which overuse occurred, you can use less allocated groundwater than your annual allocation in a quantity equal to or greater than the overuse of the prior year. And for the mutual water companies, if you use less allocated groundwater than the aggregate mutual supply in a quantity equal to or greater than the overuse from the prior water year. Now, failure to cure overuse as provided in the judgment shall be subject to an overuse assessment and/or injunctive relief. And the judgment also requires that we have committee consultation to establish the amount of overuse assessment. Just a timeline of how we got to this point and why we're asking your board to adopt this resolution. This is the first water year 2023, which was from October 23 to September 24, was the first year in which groundwater use reporting to Watermaster occurred. And then water year 2024, which is the current year ending September 30, 2025, is the cure period for the overuse accrued during water year 2023. So this is the first time that we're actually going to be able to levy an overuse assessment. February 2025, we had the draft GSP annual report, and we had Appendix A where we calculated the overuse and carryover for the previous water year 2023. We made revisions to that, sent it back to the PAC and TAC, and then we submitted this to the court and DWR as part of the annual report. On April 10, we requested consultation from the PAC on policy recommendations related to setting up the overuse assessment. They had their meeting and gave us a recommendation report, which is Exhibit 10B on May 1st. And we brought this item to your board at the June 13th meeting, but there was a request to continue this item to the current board meeting, and so that's why we brought it to this meeting. So the overuse assessment is meant to discourage groundwater use in excess of that allowed under the judgment, and the authorities as well. Those are all just meant to discourage groundwater use in excess of what's allowed under the judgment. Historically, the agency has used surcharges, rate of surcharges that are at the prevailing Calleguas Municipal Water District's Tier 2 supply rate. Calleguas is a member agency of the Metropolitan Water District and the largest purveyor within the agency. However, they've since dropped their Tier 2 supply rate and leaving just the Tier 1. And the Tier 1 2025 adopted water rates are 1,895, as shown in Exhibit 10C. The PAC recommendations, I think, are really great recommendations, and generally staff or Watermaster agrees with their recommendations that overuse be charged at the prevailing Calleguas Tier 1 rate at the end of the water year. That's a flat fee. And overuse assessment be sequestered in a separate Watermaster account reserved for replenishment. Staff just added more things to it just to make it clear for us in the direction in which we need to go, which is that the overuse be charged at the prevailing Calleguas Tier 1 rate at the end of the cure period, so that we just specify that. The overuse assessment becomes delinquent and accrue interest beginning 1 month after they're due, and delinquent overuse assessments pay interest at the then current real property tax delinquency rate for Ventura County, similar to what we have with the basin delinquent basin assessments. And finally, proposed resolution number 2025-3, which is Exhibit 10, would automatically adjust the overuse assessments consistent with the increase in the Calleguas Tier 1. As I mentioned before, we have Exhibit 10E where there was that request to bring it before to the next meeting. And the request is basically that the proposed resolution be amended to clarify that overuse assessment does not apply to those defendants and interveners because they intend to appeal the trial court's May 25 decision denying their requested relief. But this item that your board is considering and the attached resolution do not involve the applicability of overuse assessment. Applicability and an obligation to pay overuse assessment is set by the judgment, and therefore it does not involve the levying of an overuse assessment on any party or water right holder, but instead our recommendation involves establishing the amount of or rate of the overuse assessment to be levied in future once Water Master determines the overuse or any. And so the recommendations for this item are to receive and file this presentation and adopt proposed resolution 2025-3, establishing the rate of the overuse assessment as a per acre foot amount equal to Cayugas Municipal Water District's Tier 1 water supply rate at the end of the cure period, water year, establishing that overuse assessments are delinquent a month after they're due and begin accruing interest, setting the rate of interest for delinquent overuse assessment at an amount equal to the current real property tax delinquency rate for Ventura County, and directing staff to deposit overuse assessments into the Water Master overuse assessment account to be used in the LPV basin as directed by the agency board of directors. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Fry. Any questions from the board at this time?
Can we back up 2 slides? Make sure I understand this. I have in front of me the letter from Jackson Titus. And if I'm understanding this correctly, can you go back a couple slides? I need to see it on my screen also. No, but I have a photograph of the camera on me. I want the screen. Okay, there we can, no, that's not done.
Presentation?
All right, so let me just ask there we go, okay. So make sure I understand. The proposed resolution establishes this rate, and it's tied to Tier 1 at the end of the period. I understand that. And it's consistent with what we've done in the past on all our overuse charges. We tied it to Tier 2, I think is what we did before. That's no longer exists. And this number that came up on the screen, I think is consistent with numbers I've seen in the past, in the range that I've seen in the past. Then it goes on, it says that you go forward onto a next slide, and the slide references, or maybe it's the previous slide, that references this particular letter we just received. And as I read the letter, what they're saying is if we don't have an allocation because of the way the whole process was generated, we don't think we should get an assessment. And is that an overuse assessment? Is that correct? They're saying pending their appeal, we shouldn't be accruing charges during that appeal process. Is that a fair summation of what they're saying or asking?
To my assessment, yeah. Yes.
In short, yes.
Okay. Do we have the authority to do that?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the authority to
Do
what?
we have, my problem is that this whole area is under a court order. And does the court order give us authority to go outside of the court order and do things that are not allowed within the court order? Is this allowed within the court order to give them this request?
So the overuse assessment is a product of the judgment. It is established by the judgment. That judgment delegates the responsibility and the authority to determine the rate of that overuse assessment to the water master.
And does it also give us the authority to determine who it may or may not apply to?
No, the judgment determines that.
And the judgment determines that. Now, where I'm going in this exercise is that I see it in some other correspondence that we're going to see later, is that it is clear to me that staff is following the letter of what the judgment said. And I know when we went down this road of this whole exercise, the GMA, through counsel, through our attorneys, had argued that there are some flaws or weaknesses in this process, and we ought to have a chance to address those. And my understanding is the judge basically said no. So what I don't want to do, and I'm turning to you, Jason, because I don't know the answer is, I don't want to get in a position where we're trying to fix a problem that is outside the scope of the judgment, or we don't have any basis in which to make that call, and therefore, we're outside the judgment, and here we go again. We gave it our best shot when we proposed to the court and to the litigants that there are areas that are problematic, to say the least, and we need to review those areas, and we're asked the court to give us the ability to make those kinds of changes, and we were told effectively, if I'm correct, no. So I don't want to, I did not put us, I don't believe the GMA put ourselves into this dilemma. I think some of it was created by an aggressive process, aggressive legal process, a very sympathetic judge who did not listen, or we didn't prevail, whatever the case may be. But I don't want to set ourselves up for a problem in the future, and I'm not sure if what's being proposed will put us into a problem area. And I'm going to have the same question later on a different item.
I don't see a problem. The judgment basically assigns to the water master the responsibility for determining the overuse charge. That's all that's being done with the proposed resolution, determining the overuse charge, entirely consistent with the judgment, in fact, mandated by the judgment. I think the gravamen of the correspondence from Titus Jackson has to do with the application or the enforcement of that overuse assessment. This resolution says nothing about enforcement or how it's to be enforced at any point. Enforcement is exclusively the province of the court. It is also exclusively the province of the water master to decide when and against whom to seek enforcement. None of that is involved in this discussion. This is really just housekeeping, making the overuse assessment under the judgment pretty much the same as the surcharge assessment that the GMA would charge for in other basins. That's
Okay.
all it is.
You're concurring with that?
Yes.
Okay, you've answered my question.
Any other questions from the board? Michael?
I would just add to that, I think in a previous letter from Jackson Titus, they requested that the PAC provide an opinion on whether or not they should be charged an overuse assessment. And I think that, that's exactly the type of domain that the PAC was developed for. And so I would request that the PAC review this request and provide an opinion to the agency.
With that, any questions or comments from the public on this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Darrell Smith. I'm a grower. And I must confess, there's a great deal of information here that, like Mr. Mulhart, is not necessarily clear to all of us. But I would like to point out that Chairman West has clearly stated that the authority of enforcing this is apparently to the discretion of your panel. And in doing so, I'd like to point out the significance of your decision. I'd at least like to go on record. And that is, it is unsustainable. If you pump an acre foot a day, that's $1,800 a day to grow row crops or tree crops or any type of agriculture, which by nature of Ventura County and SOAR, that's what they want us to do. And that's what we want to do. But that cost would be prohibitive. And for you to enforce that on us, on what Mohart has clearly pointed out, some flaws in this judgment. And based on those flaws, I think that should be taken under consideration, that it would put us out of business. And we are on appeal. And when that appeal is heard, then perhaps those fines might be applicable. But until then, our trees will die, or we will. And I want you to know how significant that is for us as growers. I've been growing here and paying Fox Canyon and extracting water for 36 years. And felt free to do so as long as I stayed within the boundaries of what I was required. And that is stay in compliance, pay my fees. And as you well know, I attend meetings because the interest of water is inherent to what we do. So when you make this decision and turn it over to PAC, remember, there are flaws in this judgment. And hopefully, through the law, we will correct those flaws. And all we're really asking for is the opportunity to do so without going broke or having our trees die. Thank you very much for your time.
Hello, my name is Deborah Tash. I want to first state that I am a widow and that I've been saddled with this because of that and trying to catch up on everything. I want to point out that there's a flaw in this whole process in that even the judgment and the recent court case that we are now appealing has stated that we have to pay fines all the way back to when the judgment first came down. I want to point out to you, there's no water market. I've been working my whatever off, trying to find some way to replace the water. I can't get it from District 1 without a prohibitive engineering cost. There's no other water supply to this property. 58 acres are going to go fallow. And I've tried to call different people to see, well, do you have water to sell? There's no formal water market. You cannot impose fines on people with no recourse to even replace what you're stealing from them. And you didn't steal it. It was the process that stole it. And the process has to be changed. I'm really sorry. I am a little emotional, but this has been a very bad strain and a very bad time in my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Anyone else?
My name is Doug Holmesy, and my family has farmed 53 acres out in Moore Park for 50 years, and we paid all our bills. Spent thousands, in the last 10 years to put different meters on, different piping, so we could make Fox Canyon happy. We never knew about this adjudication. Other than it was going on, we didn't think it involved us because of the way it was instituted. Never received notice of it from Fox Canyon or any of our friends or family, not family, friends or farmers that are near us, until it was over. And then it took 6 months for us to find out about it. We weren't even notified that, hey, you didn't get a allocation, and I think that's wrong. I think that's against, American way, but I think it is. And we need to correct this. I think you have a clear position. I think your position is your hands are tied by the judgment. You can't make a decision. That's wrong. You can make a decision. You could, as a board, say we refuse to rule on this because it's wrong. You could say individually, I resign. This is wrong. Instead, you're going ahead with it. And I think that's wrong. I think, as Edmund Burke has been summarized to have said, the only thing evil needs to prevail is for good men and women to do nothing. And that's what you're doing by saying, all we're going to do is do these steps one by one by one and essentially do nothing. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Daryl, is this your wife? No.
It's,
My name is Joe Gillespie, and I farm 22 acres of avocados. My allocation was taken away from me, and I can't afford to continue to farm my avocado ranch with these kind of rates, overages. And I don't know what happened to my allocation. I've always used about 50% of the allocation that Fox Canyon had given me, and wasn't notified, and my allocation was taken away. There's no water market for me to buy it, so everybody else got an allocation, or they got my allocation, but there's no way for me to buy an allocation. And here you guys are putting me out of business. I don't think this board wants us to go out of business. I think they want to see avocados being farmed in Somas and in Ventura County. And I think what you guys are doing to us, putting us out of business, is wrong. It's absolutely wrong. And I'm very upset about it. And I'd like to continue to farm, but I can't with what you guys are doing to me. And I just, that's my input.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, returning to the discussion to the board, I think it's fair to say, at least I'll just speak for myself, there's a great deal of sympathy for the challenge that you folks are facing who didn't receive an allocation in the adjudication process. I think we're all sensitive to that fact and its implications, which is part and parcel perhaps of the reason why there's been no discussion, much less attempt at enforcement relative to you folks today. But it's important to realize as well that the feared overuse that you could someday face is not the only potential overuse in the basin that this water master needs to address. There are other water rights holders who've pumped and theoretically beyond their allocation and would then be subject to an overuse assessment if indeed an assessment existed. And that's all this resolution attempts to do, is establish the amount of the overuse assessment. As I mentioned, there is no discussion, there's no plan at this time for enforcement relative to those folks that are still waiting a final determination with respect to their water rights. This is merely, in my view, a procedural step establishing the amount so that in the event in the future, whether there becomes an issue relative to any water right holder with respect to overuse, the mechanism is in place, the assessment is in place. But easy for me to say, were I in your shoes, I wouldn't lose any sleep over the fact that an assessment exists because no one is seeking to enforce it against you. With that, any questions or comments from Michael?
I also just want to clarify, so we're talking about the first year of groundwater use reporting was water year 2023, which runs from October 2023 to September 2024. You have an additional year to cure that's going from October 24 to September 2025. And then my question for staff, or specifically for Fry, is when will this be posted, both the carryover as well as the overuse assessment in 2025?
So as soon as we're done with the annual allocations accounting, we did the first part, which was already submitted to the court and part of the GSP. That's where we have the carryover and overuse for the prior water year. Once we do the annual allocations again for this year, then we can see if people that had overuse from last year were able to cure it within this year, and then we can post those up. So hopefully, if all the submissions are in place, we hope to do that before the start of the new year, of the new water year.
So the establishment of a water rate tied to the replacement rate that is generated by the cost of water that goes through Kiegas, that methodology this agency has used for effectively the last 30 years. And I know because I was here then. And at that point in time, the theory was that if someone overpumps the aquifer beyond where they should be, and there was a mechanism for that, it's not the same mechanism today, but there was a mechanism for that, then the rate should be tied to what it costs to replenish the aquifer and bring it back to where it was. And at that time, the only entity that really was importing water into the area was Kiegas, and Kiegas served water to a whole bunch of users, particularly in the Santa Clara River, in the Las Posas area and on the Oxnard Plain. And I think when we first started, that cost to Kiegas was in a couple $100. But as Kiegas costs went up over time, because the cost of running the California Water Project, where it comes from Oroville or Shasta or someplace up north and imported, and the cost of maintaining it and the plumbing and everything associated with it, that cost has gone up. And that's why we're at that cost today. It was never set, we never set a cost independent of the cost of Tier 2, now Tier 1, that Kiegas uses in their billing to the cities and to others that take just Kiegas water. So my argument, just for clarification, my argument is not that the 1,825 acre feet is unjustified, because there is massive historical precedent over that process. What I'm concerned about is the amount of litigation that has gone on in the LPV area and the OPV area on the Oxnard Plain, and the fact that this agency is now tied to a massive series of lawsuits, and we as a agency do not have the authority not to listen to what the court says. And so that's what generated the bulk of my question. Do we have the authority to do what some are proposing in the letters we've gotten? And right now, what I'm hearing from counsel and what I'm hearing for the chair is now's not the time and place to have that debate. I think Jason is saying, yes, that's a fair assessment. That's not what we're trying to do today. What we're trying to do today is establish a rate, which we're required to do, and we're establishing that rate on a methodology that has been in place for a long time. And it has grown in cost. There is no question about it. And I agree with you 100% that the number is unsustainable. Personally, I'm well aware of that because my family's been in the farming business for a long time. So I encourage you to keep going with your appeal process, because the solution for coming up with a solution to this, frankly, is the appeal process. I find it totally responsible of the court and some of the litigating parties to deny individuals historical usage because they didn't fill out a form or didn't receive a form, and therefore the only solution is you don't exist. I think that is, and I see it on the Oxnard Plain as well. And I think that's wrong. I don't have, in my seat in this agency, the ability to change the court. Not on that issue. We've tried all kinds of things, but we're not making headway. So I encourage, if you have some legal basis to do what you're doing, you got to do it. With regards to the amount, it is historically set the way it is, and it will be set that way going forward. With regards to dealing with the real question, can you get a timeout card, basically? We're not debating that today. Is that a fair summation, Council?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes. Kelly?
Thank you. In reviewing what was provided to us, the PAC recommendation was to move forward with this, what I understand. But I keep looking, I understand the costs associated in the new process, and I'm looking at Cayugas's budgets for water rates for 2025, and I just didn't know if there was any leeway on any of that. I know the tier one's there, but it also includes capital construction surcharge, which is a 5%, and then increase from last year, and then also the O&M. I just didn't know if there was any flexibility in that, or if we can even ask to see if there's a percentage off or flexibility. That's a lot of money per acre feet, and for a new process, and I'm just sensitive to that. But I appreciate everyone looking into this. It is a hard discussion to have, and I just wanted to at least ask the question.
I think the way that staff arrived at this resolution and this recommendation was through the committee consultation process that's provided for in the judgment. And so the PAC had input on this, and this is one of the recommendations that they have. I wouldn't want to put Ian Pritchard. He's from Cayugas, so to answer your question.
Yeah, Ian, how do I get a discount?
No, you know what? I mean, we are always looking at our utility operators, and there are reasons that sometimes we do get a discount. There's all sorts of reasons, and so I'm going to ask.
Thanks, Supervisor Long. Ian Pritchard, Cayugas Municipal Water District. The reason it's pegged to Tier 1 today is because we don't have a Tier 2, as Farai described. Metropolitan discontinued their Tier 2 because essentially no one was ever reaching it anymore. I'm not going to use the word discount for a number of reasons, but the cost of Tier 1 water from Cayugas is already cheaper than what it would cost to get water in the ground, because that's the cost that we sell to our purveyors. And Cayugas, we can put water in the ASR well field, but that's water that Cayugas stores for Cayugas's use. In order to get water in the ground anywhere else through one of our purveyors, Waterworks District 19 and 1 buy from us, and then they put that water underground. They sell to their retail customers at a higher cost than what they buy from us. So the Tier 1 Cayugas rate is already less than the cost of what it would take to get water underground, if that makes sense.
So that means no, I can't get a discount.
But
No, but I mean, like we were talking about water markets and where do you get water? I got a project, I need 1 water credit. I'm very frustrated by that, and I totally hear those that are looking for where do they buy their water and what do they do, and so I think we have to have that dialogue for the transparency.
Sure.
We need to understand what is the cost of Cayugas water versus what they're currently getting. And what is that? I mean, I think it's important that we all understand it, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate the question. And
Yeah.
because Cayugas can't sell the water that we sell to others at a certain price that we've demonstrated through our public process is the cost of delivering that water. We can't then provide water at a cheaper rate to others without anticipating blowback from the rest.
Right, and we also have what, Prop 218 and all this other stuff and
Right.
rules and regulations and state laws that have to do that.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to make sure that we had that conversation.
Yeah,
So
no,
thank
appreciate the
you.
question.
I appreciate it.
So before you go, again, I think, you know, in fairness and in transparency, the process of setting that rate that the GMA has used was never a debate, and I won't say never, I can't remember that far back, but the rate was tied to Kiegas's rate.
Right.
And we trusted that Kiegas also had a huge responsibility because of the people that you sold that water to. And in that process, that rate has gone up because the cost at the state level and the whole system has gone up with changes to Oroville, Shasta, the delivery system, and now the proposed $22 billion pipeline under the Sacramento River to meet environmental issues will have an impact on it. So the message, the message is that the cost of water is going up. This particular surcharge has been, and I believe will continue to be tied to the cost of MET. I think where the real angst is, if I were sitting in their shoes, would be that because I did not participate in this lawsuit as the way it was set up, and this is how I read it, that if you don't participate with us, then we're going to exclude you into a category of non-respondents and you get nothing. Those letters went out to a whole bunch of people in the city of Oxnard. I got those phone calls. And it really upset me. How in the world can you do that? Now, we're trying to figure out a way, you folks, some of you folks are trying to figure out a way to get your nose back under the tent. And we tried to do that at the GMA, to say, raise a flag and say, we need to fix some of these issues because there's some unintended consequences that are going to come down the road. And we were denied that through the court process. The court process is where we have to make the fight. And I don't know if you're going to be successful or not, but that's where the fight has to be. And I wish it wasn't that way. But I don't see where the agency has the ability to unilaterally make rate changes that force Kiegas to sell water at a discount effectively. You can't, we don't have that authority. And so that's why we tied it to, at that time, you were the only ones bringing in water. And I think it's important that people understand that the agency has its hands tied in so many ways because of unintended consequences, how we got ourselves in this position. I wish we could unwind it all. I don't know how to do that. I don't know if there's a mechanism to do that, other than you folks have to do what you're doing. And from a purely personal standpoint, I support what you're trying to do, because if I was sitting in your shoes, I'd have to do the same.
Any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 2025-03?
I'll move.
Is a motion to adopt 2503? Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. We need a roll call. Yes.
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 All right, thank you. Let's move on then to item number 11, the Las Posas Valley Basin Optimization Plan.
Good afternoon, Chairwas, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dr. Farai Kaseke, here to present Item number 12 on the adoption of the 2025 Las Posas Valley Basin Optimization Plan. So the Las Posas Valley adjudication judgment requires that Water Master prepare basin optimization yield study, and this study determines the operating yield and the ramp down rate for each water year through water year 2039, such that the sustainable yield and the operating yield are the same by 2040, and therefore we can achieve sustainable management of the basin in accordance with the SIGMA requirements. Now, critical to the development of the basin optimization yield study is the basin optimization plan, whose purpose is to evaluate and select the basin optimization projects that are likely to be practical, reasonable, and cost-effective to implement prior to 2040 to maintain the operating yield at 40,000 acre-feet per year, or as close thereto as achievable. Here's a timeline of how we got to where we are right now and the consultation processes that have happened. So the judgment envisions that the basin optimization plan should have been completed by June 26, 2024. Obviously, we're not there. We blew past that deadline. Your board, due to various reasons, but your board adopted a scope of work and a contract to begin the basin optimization plan in January of 2024. And in March of 2024, we sent out a consultation request to the PAC to begin project evaluation criteria and the ranking that will be used in the basin optimization plan. In July, we sent the same consultation request to the TAC. There was that delay because the TAC was not yet formed prior to that. And so as soon as they were up and running, we sent this to them. In August of 24, the TAC provided us a recommendation report on the project evaluation criteria and the ranking. We revised that the project evaluation criteria and ranking based on the feedback we got from the TAC. And we brought this to your board at the September 2024 meeting, and your board adopted this. And this is what we've used for the project ranking that we have right now. In December of 2024, we sent out a committee consultation to the PAC and TAC with a draft of the basin optimization plan. And the PAC and TAC discussed this draft basin optimization plan and gave us a recommendation report in February of this year. And these are exhibits 11C and 11E. Watermaster just finished their response reports. These are 11B and 11D, and here we are before your board after revising the draft basin optimization plan, incorporating all the input that we got from the PAC and TAC through the consultation process. So both committees discussed the draft basin optimization plan in at least 3 meetings each, and the PAC provided a total of 6 recommendations and 99 comments by each of the individual members of the PAC. The TAC provided 10 recommendations and 129 comments. And so based on this committee feedback, staff working with their consultant, DUDAC, extensively revised the draft 2025 basin optimization plan, which is the document, the plan that you have as Exhibit 11A, and crafted responses to both the PAC and TAC recommendations and comments, which are the attached exhibits. At this point, I just want to point out that I think this is what the judgment envisioned. You have a consultation process, you have a lot of feedback. We go back to the drawing board and have these revisions and incorporate as much as we can from that. And I can honestly say the document that you have before you is a much improved version of the document. And I think the PAC and TAC had really good recommendations and comments. So I'd like to just give them an applause for working corroboratively with us. Now, the basin optimization projects that we have shown up there, the judgment lists some basin optimization projects that should be involved in the basin optimization plan. However, there's a set criteria on how those projects can get into the basin optimization plan. And based on the feedback that we got from PAC and TAC, we rearranged this, adopted some, combined some, if they were similar, based on TAC recommendations. And we ended up with this list of 9 that we have that is right there. And the ones that are highlighted in blue are the 5 basin optimization projects that we recommend going forward. And based on the feedback that we got, we then use these 5 basin optimization projects to develop an implementation plan, describe interdependencies, a budget, and this is all from that feedback process that we got from the PAC and TAC. And so there was a lot of revision that happened with this. Now, I could go through and go one by one for the recommendations that the PAC and TAC gave through, but I think it's much easier to simply acknowledge that there's a lot of work that has gone into this, and we reviewed this and accepted most of these changes that were feasible and reworked and revised the way that we looked at the projects. And we really have to be looking at the projects that can be implemented within a short space of time and which already has existing infrastructure. And so those were elements that we were taking from the PAC and TAC recommendations. And the individual recommendations, we have the responses that we've made in your packets and the comments, responses to each and every single comment that was made. Those are also attachments in your agenda packet. In summary, I guess what we're basically saying is that the draft 2025 Basin Optimization Plan has undergone significant revisions based on the committee consultation process. I think this is what the judgment was looking for, that you have stakeholder engagement and participation. Watermaster has prepared response reports to both the PAC and TAC, and the draft 2025 Las Posas Valley Basin Optimization Plan is ready for your board's adoption. And also, I'd like to just reiterate that the Basin Optimization Plan is an iterative process. So you have the 2025 Basin Optimization Plan, but you have the opportunity again in 2030 and 2035 to do this. So for anything that we might need to do, we can do it in the next one. But given the time constraints that we have right now, we're already more than a year behind. I think this is the best way that we can proceed. The recommendations are basically to receive and file this presentation. And secondly, approve agency staff's draft responses to the PAC and TAC and recommendation reports, and adopt the 2025 Basin Optimization Plan for the Las Posas Valley Basin. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Farai. I want to thank PAC and TAC for the work they did. I was really impressed with the recommendations and the breadth of the comments, although I have to admit that the format in which the comments were reported to the board damn near made me blind because the text was so small. It took me hours to get through it. But I was really impressed with the thoughtfulness that PAC and TAC brought to this process, and equally grateful that staff took that seriously and incorporated that into the draft plan. I agree, that's exactly the way the judgment was intended to be implemented. And more than that, I just think that's smart policy and good science. So anyway, thank you all. Any other comments or questions from the board before we open it up? No, hearing then, any questions or comments from the public with respect to the Basin Optimization Plan?
Again, good afternoon. Mine comes more as a question. Is it the presumption that in order to maintain the Fox Canyon aquifer, that it will be necessary to purchase water from Cayugas? Is that a given, or is that a thought that is built in? I mean, along with the key word seems to be cost. Everyone's concerned with cost. I guess the next thing that involves cost is the volume of water that's available. If the necessary volume of water is necessary, then the cost of importing water from Cayugas is a moot point. And I guess that's my question. I understand it's just a recommendation, but in that recommendation, is it an understanding that that will be something that will always be done, or just partly done sometimes by some way of monitoring the aquifer's health, that there's enough water there? Also, in those equations, there's there's another aquifer that I think has plenty of water in it, and it's Epworth's Gravel, which I happen to be a party to, that has absolutely no attachment whatsoever to Fox Canyon. And that comes from Brian Bondi and monitoring my well. I back up to the ASR field where they do pumping and extractions. So I guess what I'm getting at is perhaps there's another alternative other than the expensive water from Cayugas. And if so, how do you determine that? Thank you.
Darrell, the answer to your question is that under the judgment, the target, the goal, is to develop projects and processes that may accomplish a sustainable yield of 40,000 acre feet, or as close as we can get to that. There is a difference between 40,000 acre feet and the current sustainable yield of the basin. And the projects that have been listed and proposed and are being researched are an effort to move the needle, to get from the current sustainable yield to that 40,000 acre feet. One among the projects you read about is buying water when it's available from Cayugas. But if there are other projects that can get us to the goal that's established in the judgment, and they're more efficient and less expensive, I'm happy to hear about them.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just a quick comment. I concur with what the chair just said, that this process has to include as many different ideas as we can to find additional water to bring into the area. Right now, the only ticket we have, frankly, is through the Cayugas process by the very nature of how that valley is created and geologically speaking. But if there's other ways to do it,
Bring it on.
we'll look at it. Bring them on, and we'll have to look at it.
Well, and I would like to just say thank you to everyone who showed up to our operations committee meetings. Lynn and I have worked quite a few years on the work that's in the pages here that I see for the project ranking. And how do we rank it? How do we see what projects are most valuable and so forth? And that was based on the committee and all those that participated. And so I want to say thank you, because I see in this plan really the 9 items that are there all to drive more water into this basin, and not saying one's more favorite than the other. It's saying that we need to work regionally and work together on this. And so I just wanted to say thank you very much, because I know those weren't the most fun meetings to come to. I will acknowledge, but I think we've gotten great progress, and you see it here in this plan. And I think it's great. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the board?
Yeah, playing on what Supervisor Long said, I believe that PAC and TAC over time have lived up to what their mission was. The quality of work that's coming out of PAC and TAC is good. Some of it, just like what we do at the GMA, just like what we do at United Water, The timing is not perfect all the time because the problems are a lot more difficult than we anticipated, and it takes time to work our way through these problems and think about them. But collectively, as an entity that is trying to function and is fully engaged in trying to be helpful to the LPV area, PAC and TAC have lived up to that. And I hope they continue doing what they're doing. It doesn't mean that everything they say we're going to buy, we'll challenge them, they're going to challenge us, we're going to have to go through this process. But the fact of the matter is, I think the system is maturing and working, and I support that.
All right. If there are no other questions or comments, is there a motion to approve agency staff's draft responses to the PAC and TAC recommendation reports and adopt the 2025 Basin Optimization Plan?
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion's carried. We will move ahead to item 13, correct?
Correct. Just, Farai has a presentation on this and just wanted to sort of talk through items 13 and then moving to item 12. The first is to get a presentation on the basin optimization yield study and provide any comments or direction to staff. And then item 12 is then to execute the professional services contract modification to move forward with that yield study. Moving 13 ahead of 12 really allows us to provide a presentation to you, the board, get direction, ask questions as appropriate from you, and then move to item 12 and include any of those items that you would like included in that or direction to be included in that. The one sort of additional item I'd like to sort of put out there before Fry does his presentation, the recommendations for this item, item 13, are to receive and file this presentation. Number 2, to provide direction to staff. As a third potential bullet point, depending upon the presentation and the questions and the direction that you, the board, would like to give, that may be an opportunity or necessary to continue this item if there are significant questions or there are issues. So I wanted to put that out there before the presentation so that if we really kind of want to follow through with a little more conversation and information to you, we can continue this item. But the recommendation as is to receive and file and provide direction. But there may be that third bullet point if it's necessary. So with that, I'll let Farai give the presentation, and then we can talk through what your direction might be.
Thank you.
Chairperson, members of the board, for the record again, I'm Dr. Farai Kaseke, agency staff, bringing item 13, which is the Las Posas Valley Basin Optimization Yield Study Preferred Modeling Alternative Approach. As I mentioned earlier before, in the previous item, the judgment requires Watermaster to prepare a basin optimization yield study, and that the study determines the operating yield and the ramp down rate for each water year through water year 2039, such that the sustainable yield and operating yield are the same by 2040. This is an iterative process. You have the initial basin optimization yield study for 2025. 2030, you have there's another opportunity to have another study there, and in 2035. Also, just to mention that the study is also used to determine each water right holder's annual allocation. Back to another timeline. So the judgment envisions that the basin optimization yield study should have been completed by January 29 of 2025. But here we are in June, and that's not a reality. And so in December 2024, Watermaster sent a consultation request to the PAC and TAC, informing them that due to exigent circumstances, the timeline would not be able to meet that. And one of these is related to the modeling in West Las Posas management area. In that same memo, staff and DUDAC indicated that the timeline that we're working with an amended schedule to complete it probably by about December 2025 25 was based on the assumption that United would be able to perform the modeling for the West Las Posas management area. In that same memo, we identified that in the event that United is unable to perform that modeling for the West Las Posas management area, would still need to continue with a basin optimization yield study and provided alternative approaches that we could use to further this study. At the January 22, 2025 meeting, we gave your board an update on this amended schedule and what it would mean for us and for basin management, because this basically meant if you adopted, if the study was complete in December of 2020 of this year, then the operating yield would need to be extended by another year. And so your board gave direction that staff and DUDAC select their preferred alternative approach, modeling approach, and submit it to the PAC and TAC for consultation. And so DUDAC and staff worked on that and provided the best alternative approach that we could come up with, sent it for PAC and TAC consultation. We gave your board an update on that schedule at the April 23, 2025 meeting, and then we received the recommendation reports from PAC and TAC, and here we are today, where we're going to ask your board's direction. Now, the best available science refers to the use of sufficient and credible information and data specific to the decision being made and the time frame available for making that decision. That is consistent with scientific and engineering professional standards of practice. And so when we look at these alternative approaches that I'm going to list in a moment, we have to look at it from this lens. You have to take the period that you're trying to get the work done as one of those criteria. And these are the original modeling alternatives that the staff and DUDA came up with. And your board asked us to drop the last one, the third one, development of a new numerical groundwater flow model, because of the cost, not because of the cost, but because of the time that it would add to the schedule. And so we came up with another modeling alternative, which is estimation of the basin optimization yield using United Water Conservation District's periodic evaluation model files to run new scenarios, and this is our preferred alternative approach. Again, staff has mentioned in the past that having United model, that's the preferred alternative, that's a best foot forward. But given where we are, we're already so far behind, we haven't been able to get United on a contract. We still have to have a path forward for us to be able to comply with the requirements of the judgment. Hence, these three alternatives and our preferred alternative. This chart, oh, it's so tiny. I think the last part of it shows that under the original scheduled date that we're supposed to complete this by, it should be ready for your board, for your board's approval by December 12th, 2025. But with our preferred alternative approach, given where we are and the circumstances that we have right now, the preferred alternative approach will be ready probably by, for your board's adoption of the study by May, the May meeting, if we stick to this schedule. Again, it's hard to make a decision based on alternatives that are there. They have pros and cons, but I think the PAC and the TAC has been fantastic, and being able to look at the issues and seeing where we are and appreciating where we are right now. And so the PAC in its recommendation report says it concurs with the Water Master and DUDEC that the alternative providing for the use of the estimation of the basin optimization yield using United Water Conservation District's periodic evaluation model files to run new scenarios is the most favorable approach. So again, this is just acknowledging that this is, given where we are, this is the best approach. And the tag says the proposed approach preserves the original technical methodology for basin optimization and maintains consistency with the GSP and other analyses that also employ the two models representing the Las Posas Valley Basin. These are two models that are used, one for the East Las Posas management area and the second one for the West Las Posas management area. We're relying on United to do the West Las Posas management area, but that doesn't seem to be an option at the moment, and we need a way forward. And so the PAC gave the recommendations as well. They wanted additional information on cost and schedule impacts to upgrading this periodic evaluation model. And one of them, this is kind of just summarized, you have that there. The extension of the modeling period to 2024 instead of 1979. And this might be just a confusion with the future hydrology in the model, which is the one from 1930 to 1979. The historical model was updated. United updated its coastal plain model between the time that it did the GSP evaluation and the periodic evaluation in 2024 and extended that historical model to 2022. This is good if we're looking at simulated groundwater, simulated versus measured groundwater elevations. You can kind of go and do some validation of that model. And so I think that's, I think at this point, this is something that we can easily deal with. And secondly, what they're looking at is the Psalmist Fault was changed from a no-flow to general head boundary for the periodic evaluation, but the model was not calibrated. Now, our understanding is that United Water Conservation District updated their model calibration before use in the periodic evaluation. We haven't received any documentation to that, but that's what they've indicated. And so if they've done that, we're hoping that they will give us that documentation for us to move forward. And so there's no need for us really to do a second calibration for that. And then thirdly,
Can I ask a question on that? So the suggestion of the dates, isn't there also a suggestion which DWR and Sigma states that you have to utilize that incorporates the largest droughts and the largest waters and kind of gives you more of an average when you're doing modeling?
Yes, but if we look at that future hydrology 1930 to 1979 period, I think this was done during the GSP, I think by the tag. We identified the period in which we could use for those future simulations. And just the update for the historical model was to update the observations that we could see to 2022.
Okay, and so it's allowed through DWR to move those points? Because usually your modeling is based on those years, then you do a 5-year update. You're not changing what you're modeling or where you're modeling is. It's your base.
Yeah, we're
is what
just
I understood.
updating that model. That's all we did. That's all United did.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, thank you.
And then thirdly, perform the model recalibration as well as the model validation, sensitivity and uncertainty analysis needed to support the model. Again, our understanding is that United has done some model calibration. We're waiting for documentation on that. And in addition, we don't have the files required to conduct that additional analysis that the PAC wants us to perform.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
In your mind, is there any sort of simulation or stimulus that we can use to expedite getting these models and getting some of these things you've mentioned? They haven't come forward in time, not pointing fingers or names, but is there something that could be done to expedite some of this happening on a quicker basis?
I'll defer to counsel.
Council, is there anything that you see that can be done to create these things to happen in a little faster timeframe? The
Not
people
that-
that come to the meeting and sit here, I can imagine that I can imagine what they're thinking when you hear this information.
Not that I'm aware of. At this particular time, the United model is the subject of a protective order in the OPV adjudication. And so it may be subject to that protective order and subject to disclosure only pursuant to that protective order and its requirements. And so at this particular time, United has not granted us access to that. United.
When you use the term may be, is it possible that it could not be? Or does that take separate litigation? I mean, what does it take to get to an answer?
The United file is the subject of that protective order.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the TAC recommendations. Recommendation 1 is similar to the PAC recommendation reference to the Sawmiss Fold. And I think, yes, there are some discrepancies in how this Sawmiss Fault is being represented, but at the same time, management actions will be based on the observed water levels. So you're using the model as a tool, but you also have to go and ground truth what's happening. So I think that's something that we can work with. Secondly, clarify what criteria will be used to assess undesirable results in the West Lesbos management area when comparing basin optimization yield study to project and alternative pumping scenarios to the baseline scenario. Again, we're basically going to be looking at the minimum threshold groundwater elevations at all key wells after 2040. And so we've used the basin optimization. We've used the same model for the periodic evaluation, and we've seen that those threshold groundwater elevations at key wells were above the minimum threshold at that point. So I think we should be fine with that. And then thirdly, preemptively consider what information from the basin optimization model scenarios can be shared with the TAC and other interested parties. This is what Council has just answered, and we've tried to identify which areas we could be able to share some stuff, but things that are within United's files that may be subject to a protective order. And so it makes it very difficult for us to answer. The PAC and tax recommendations are all very reasonable and would like to make those available. However, it's the circumstances that we are under that kind of makes it really difficult for us. But at the end of the day, we still have to move forward with the modeling process and completing the basin optimization yield study. Now, in the absence of United Water Conservation District's modeling services, staff and DUDAC have presented alternative approaches and identified a preferred alternative approach, which we can kind of look at in this case and say this is the best available science, considering what the statement says, the definition. PAC concurs that the preferred alternative approach is the most favorable approach. TEC acknowledges that the alternative preferred approach preserves original technical methodology and maintains consistency with the GSP and other analysis that also employ the two models representing the Las Valley Basin. By no means are we saying that this is the best, but that this is the best method, but we're looking at it in terms of what it allows us to be able to do. It is the best of the three or four alternatives that we have listed there, and it should enable us to then continue with the basin optimization yield study, given that we're already more than a year behind with this study. There's also been work that's been done behind the scenes. We're looking at the baseline scenarios. We're working with a consultant, DUDAC. This is for the East Lesbos management area. And so we're lacking on what needs to be done on the West Lesbos management area. And so we'd like to get everything wrapped up and done at the same time, if this is the direction that your board so wishes to move forward with, if you'd like. I think Water Masters followed the judgment and engaged stakeholders via the committee consultation process. We have received their recommendations. We have responded to their recommendations with the draft response reports that are attached in this item. And also, we need to consider that the basin optimization yield study is an iterative process with more studies scheduled in the future, 2030 and 2035. Recommendations are you receive and file this presentation and provide direction to staff on the preferred modeling alternative schedule and completion of response reports. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Farai. I encouraged that staff and PAC and TAC all agree that the preferred alternative approach is viable everybody also agrees that using United's calibrated model would be the best option, and I'd encourage staff to continue to communicate with United in the hope that at some point, perhaps, that opportunity presents itself. But failing that, we're in a damned if you do and damned if you don't situation. You know, we're under a timeline to get this done, and every month that passes without action exposes the water master to more and more criticism and potential consequences from the court. And under the circumstances, I mean, basically what we have to do is basically make the best effort we can using the best available science. It may not be the perfect available science, but there's no reason to make the perfect the enemy of the good. And if we can do good work, let's do it. And do it expeditiously, not sit around and wait for other events that are outside of our control to determine how we proceed with our business. That's my thought.
Chair, if I may. Last week, your board and the agency received a letter from certain parties to the adjudication requesting mediation on a number of different things, including this particular issue, the study and the model used in that study. Your board has not had a chance to discuss that letter and that request for mediation with counsel and outside counsel. And so with that in mind, I would recommend, or should your board wish to discuss in closed session this afternoon with counsel and outside counsel that request, my recommendation would be to continue this item until the next meeting.
Well, there's no action required on this item other than to give staff direction.
That's correct.
And asking staff to proceed full speed ahead doesn't change what the board may decide to do with respect to other requests. So at this point, given the limited scope of this request, I don't see any reason to continue this. If indeed further discussions on other ancillary issues are appropriate in closed sessions, we can have them at some other time, but I don't think that has to interfere with this agency getting its work done. As you've probably heard me say many times, it's imperative that we get our work done in a timely fashion, based on the best available science, irrespective of whatever objections or consternation it develops. We simply have a job to do, and I think we need to do it now. That's my 2 cents.
Makes sense.
Any other comments from the board before we open it up to the public? Any questions or comments from the public with respect to the preferred modeling alternative approach for the basin optimization yield study? Hearing none, we'll return back to, Darrell, you're going to get up. I saw you shifting there.
Sure.
Why don't we just get you a seat down front? Would that be helpful?
I need the exercise.
That's true, I get it. Where's your cane?
It's over there.
Okay.
I'm trying to break myself of that habit. Again, good afternoon. On the modeling of the Las Posas Basin, the East Las Posas Basin, it appears to me, from the limited knowledge that I have, that some things have been left out of the modeling. For example, Callegas, when Susan Mulligan was running it, asked me if I would be willing to put a monitoring well on my property, and I agreed to do so. And at great expense, they put this well in. And in doing so, they went down 1,300 feet and found that there, Fox Canyon aquifer existed there, Epworth gravel existed there, Fairview aquifer existed there, and there was one aquifer that I'm not sure of the name, but it was not worthy of water. So my concern is, when modeling all this, how much of this are you taking into consideration? I know that the Las Posas Basin encompasses my aquifer, even though it's not calculated in the math of the 40,000 acre feet. At least it's, to my understanding, it's not. So again, my concern is, in modeling this math for PAC and TAC, is that being considered? And if not, why not? Thank you.
Fortunately or unfortunately, Darrell, there isn't a modeling expert on this board. That's why we rely on staff and consultants. They're the modeling experts. They've heard your comments. I'm sure they'll take those up. Because if there's missing water, they're determined to find it.
Great.
Anyone else? Okay, returning back to the board. Any further direction or advice to staff on this matter?
Mine would just be on the dates. I agree with you, Chair, about making sure we get the work done. I'm really excited that we have staff to get this work done. And I know it's an estimate, and hopefully we can get the modeling and all of that together. So I just wanted to say thank you to our team for putting this together. And hopefully we will hit these dates with our staffing, so thank you.
Chair. With the question that the member of the public asked, is there any member of staff that could each take a shot at that answer?
Yes, the Grimes Canyon Aquifer is in the model and will be part of the modeling exercise.
Identify yourself, Robert.
Robert Hampson, agency staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See, we have staff.
All right. Anyone else? I think you've got the direction you're going to get. Okay, let's move on then to item number 12.
Going forward now with the basin optimization yield study contract, this is sort of the takeoff on this previous discussion. So I'll turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, Jeff. Chair West, members of the board, my name is Robert Hampson. I am your hydrologist here. Here today to talk about a contract modification to complete the basin optimization yield study. I'm not going to say that as many times as Farai did, so for the purposes of this conversation, we can just call it the study. So we need to complete this study, which computes the basin optimization yield. This is essentially the water budget for the basin, the inflows, return flows, and possible augmented water that we could create through projects and other optimization. If that doesn't work, then the sort of final step of this process would be to compute the amount of ramp down that could be necessary to bring the basin into sustainability. So we've worked a lot through committee consultation. Farai talked about that. In December, originally, we were hoping to contract for the modeling services to perform this study. And at that time, October of 2024, I came to you with this original contract. We were still hoping to contract for the other modeling services. So as we learned that we might not be able to get that under contract, we immediately engaged committees. That was in December of 2024 with some alternatives. Then as the dust settled around April of 2025, we realized that the best option would be for us to run the model ourselves with our consultant, which we are very capable of doing. And so we immediately went forward and consulted committees on this as well, which we just discussed. So these are the tasks that have already been approved. Just want to remind you, there's a separate model between East and West Las Posas. So there's sort of two modeling exercises that will need to be completed here. What I want you to know is that on the approved contract, number 2, we're fully complete for East Las Posas. So we have everything we need from a contracting perspective. We've been running the model. We've already begun the study for this part of the basin. And so this is just the final missing piece to complete the contracting necessary for West Las Posas. So we've made a lot of progress already. The current approved total is $212,500. And if you'll notice between 2 and 3, so we're assuming we're going to contract the West Las Posas modeling out. So this is basically filling in that gap. So here are the additional tasks for this item. So there's basically 3 steps to the scenarios here. The first one is modeling at the current yield, which is 40,000 acre feet. So we'll run the model scenarios looking at what the impacts are of pumping at that level. Then the second part of the scenarios is the project scenarios. So we'll look at how much water can we augment with the projects that are identified in the plan that you just adopted. And then the third part is those alternative scenarios, which is basically calculating the ramp down. And to some of your points earlier today, we have a lot of water available through Cayugas. There are projects that we could pretty much certainly implement to augment the yield. The question is how much? And once we determine how much, then we can determine what that cost might be. And then that will undergo some more committee consultation to determine what the appetite is to pay for that, if necessary, or if we get to the point that we need to ramp down, then we can determine what the least cost is or the most preferable path forward to have the basin optimization yield be sustainable by 2040. Okay, so this adds a total of $90,500 to the currently approved contract. So the total proposed contract amount will be $303,000 exactly. All right, the recommendation. Staff recommends the board approve and authorize the interim executive officer to execute professional services contract modification with DUDEC to prepare the Las Posas Basin 2025 Basin Optimization Yield Study for a total cost increase of $90,500, which brings the total contract maximum to $303,000.
Thank you, Robert.
Take any
Questions or comments from the board? Doesn't seem to me like, I don't want to say that we have no options, but it seems to me this is the most prudent course to get the work done as expeditiously as possible. So if there are no questions from the board, any questions or comments from the public on this item? All right, hearing none, we'll return it back to the board. Is there a motion to adopt the recommended action and authorize the interim executive officer to execute the revised professional services contract with DUDEC to perform the additional tasks described?
Can we just confirm TAC did approve as well, right?
Yes?
I just like saying that out loud for the transparency of it all. I would motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Thank you. We'll move on then to item number 14.
Chair West and Board,
Did I
We have-
skip something?
we have a presentation on this item. However, we have received a legal letter, and I wanted to defer to council on maybe outlining what that said and any recommendations that you might have in terms of actions.
I would just note that this morning or last night, the agency did receive correspondence from Del Norte Water Company on this particular item. It has been provided to your board in advance of today's meeting. I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to it, but I hope that everybody did receive it. If there are any questions regarding that letter, I'd be happy to answer them, but I believe that Del Norte is here and your board may ask questions of them as well.
My only question, is there anything in that letter that you felt necessary for you or staff to respond to before we take up this issue?
I don't believe so, no.
In that case, let's proceed with item number 14.
Good afternoon, Chairs, members of the board. For the record, I'm Dr. Faraikas Ege, agency staff, bringing item 14, Del Norte Water Company and Benoni Group protest and request for refund for water year 2023 basin assessment. So the Las Posas Valley adjudication, the judgment requires water master levy and collector basin assessment from water right holders in the basin. It says that the water master shall set, levy, and collect basin assessments and fees from water right holders, and that water master shall assess all water right holders a uniform basin assessment per acre foot of annual allocation held by the water right holder. But there's an exception to this requirement, and it's basically says that water master may reduce the amount of the basin assessment levied on water right holders that pay an assessment to United Water Conservation District if water master determines after committee consultation that such a reduction is appropriate as a matter of equity. And so just to kind of put this into context, you see the blue area that's highlighted. That is the area that we're talking about in the West Las Posas region, the part that cuts with United Service Area, which goes up that way. And so I do have a note there which says that the water master is responsible for implementation and enforcement of the judgment. So that responsibility for implementation of the judgment falls with water master and not with United. Now, basin assessments fund the water master budget. And the water master budget includes costs for administrative management of the basin, investigations, inspections, compliance with and enforcement of the judgment, personnel costs, infrastructure, maintenance, utilities, general operation and maintenance, and costs arising from professional services contracts. The construction, operation, maintenance, and administration of groundwater enhancement of basin optimization projects, and reference to the 5-year budget included with the basin optimization plan. However, 2023, water year 2023 is the first year of operation for the water master, and so there are no basin optimization projects or anything of that sort or replenishment that has happened under water master. This has been purely administrative that has been going on. Looking at our timeline here, your board adopted Resolution 2023-03, which set the basin assessment at $64 an acre foot to be paid in 2 installments, March 1st, 2024, and June. And in June, with Resolution 2024-04, your board rescinded that the second installment. However, with the adoption of 2023-03, your board, the adoption of that resolution is basically basin management action. And this was done in December 2023. Del Norte's first protest letter was received in April, sometime in April, and we received a second letter in July, and these were processed on the basin assessment that had been levied, and they called on that section of the judgment that talks about being able to reduce the basin assessment for members in the West Las Posas region that receive water from United. We sent this to the PAC for consultation and policy recommendations. And the PAC discussed this item and gave us a recommendation report, basically requesting for tech consultation for technical analysis. We brought it to your board in October of '24, and your board denied that request, noting that this is purely a policy issue and not a technical issue. And I asked staff to return this to the PAC for second recommendation report. The PAC reiterated their stance that they could not make a decision on this, and so here we are. In January of this year, we brought this item before your board and had to pull it off at the request of Del Norte. And this brings us to where we are today. We also have additional protest letter from Del Norte Water Company and the Venoni Group protest letter, which was submitted April 17, 2025, which is Exhibit 14F. The Venoni protest letter is along the same lines of the Del Norte protest letters, and that's why we've combined these two. Now, judicial review under the judgment, it says that any party may seek judicial review of a basin management action such as the adoption of a basin management, but the disputing party must timely exhaust opportunities for relief through the submission of written comments and engaging in mediation prior to seeking judicial review unless Watermaster decides to forego or waive mediation. The disputing party must request mediation within 60 days of Watermaster taking the basin management action. Looking at our timeline again, the first protest letter that we received from Del Norte was in April 18, 2024. And they claimed their basin assessments covered costs of projects or services duplicated by United or do not benefit Del Norte. And the second protest was on July 12th, and the third protest was on February 8, 2025. And they basically reiterated the protest and claims of duplication or no benefit, responded to arguments in January 22nd, 2025 FCGMA board letter. The Vanoni protest dated April 17, 2025 claims that the group is paying both United and FCGMA, and we're truly paying 2 times for the same thing, unquote, and requests Watermaster review this situation and resolve it as a matter of equity. So, the judgment allows Watermaster to reduce the amount of a basin assessment paid by United customers if Watermaster determines that such a reduction is appropriate as a matter of equity. This discretion is based on the premise that water right holders located in the western portion of the basin within United's service area presently pay assessments to United, a portion of which is used to finance United's ongoing activities that are designed to replenish the basin and neighboring basins. Water year 2023 basin assessments were budgeted and used only for judgment administration and implementation related to Watermaster activities and work. And so there is no replenishment that has happened under the water year 2023 basin assessments. And so the recommended action is to deny this, as there is no duplication. No amount of water year 2023 basin assessment used for water replenishment projects or services like those provided by United. The December 15, 2023 board letter on the Watermaster budget explained that the budget did not include cost estimates for projects and programs, and the budget may need to be adjusted with the addition of projects. The judgment appoints Fox Canyon as Watermaster to administer and implement the judgment and physical solution. United is not a party to the adjudication, nor United Water Conservation District role or responsibility under the judgment. Again, at a fiscal committee meeting, there's talk of developing a separate budget to finance projects and replenishment, which is separate from the basin assessments. Just to avoid a situation like this so that we can take that into consideration. But as it stands, no amount of work has been dedicated to replenishment projects, especially with the water year 2023 basin assessment. The judgment requires the party disputing basin management action to request mediation with Watermaster within 60 days of Watermaster taking the basin management action. Watermaster approved Resolution 2023-03 on December 15, 2025. Del Norte's first protest letter was submitted 18 April 2024. That's 126 days after approval of the basin assessment. Vanoni Group protest letter was submitted April 17, 2025, which is 490 days after the approval of the basin assessment. Neither Del Norte nor the Vanoni Group protests were timely, and neither the Del Norte nor the Vanoni Group protest letters requested mediation. The recommendations for this item is to receive and file this board letter and presentation and deny the Del Norte Water Company and the Vanoni Group protests and requests for refund for the water year 2023 basin assessments. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Any questions from the board at this time? No, thank you. Anyone on behalf of Del Norte or Vanoni?
Good afternoon, board members. I'm John Orr, local attorney, probate attorney, not a water lawyer. I am also the president of Del Norte Water Company, and I speak for its shareholders and landowner members. And I'm also a farmer myself. I farm 200 acres of avocados and lemons on the corner of Walnut and La Loma. I want to leave to council who is here Barbara Brenner of White Brenner to discuss the time issues. I don't think that they have any merit. I think this is a stretch by the staff of the GMA, and I don't think it has any merit whatsoever. But I'd like to talk about the merits of this. Paragraph 7.9 of the judgment empowers the water master, you, to make an equitable adjustment to its assessments based on amounts paid by the Las Posas Valley growers who have paid and are paying assessments to United Water Conservation for its work. So I guess the big question is, what is the inequity that we perceive? Simply, United's activities, whether it be monitoring or modeling or any other work there or replenishment, they benefit the entire basin. They do not just benefit the West. It is a present benefit. It's not a future benefit. It has nothing to do with the establishment of this agency. It has to do with what we have paid. And you've spent a good deal of this afternoon talking about the Boy study and the United modeling. I know there's some controversy about the United modeling, and I'm not going to get involved in that. But needless to say, it's very important to the water master to use the modeling that United has created. Its work on modeling and monitoring and replenishment help everyone on the basin. It's reflected in the safe yield of the basin. It's reflected in the operating yield. It's reflected in the Boy study. Who pays for this and who has paid for this historically and now? The West-West. There's a certain group of the constituents that you have in the Las Posas Valley Basin in the West-West that are in United's borders. We pay now $287 per acre foot for our ag water that we pump, and we pay $312.76 for domestic water. That's not something anybody else in the basin pays for, just the people in the West-West. And yet, who's getting the benefit of it? You've just spent almost 2 hours discussing the Boy study and what you're going to approve and how you're going to go forward with the good work that you have to do. But it's going to be largely based on United's work. You have to use them, and we have paid for them. That is, those in the West-West. Why should only those of us who live in the West-West and who have paid these have to provide that for everyone else? To me, it's inequitable. And I would urge you to consider that no one else's water rates have to include, or water costs have to include, that $287 per acre foot of ag water. That's over $100,000 for us and for those in my area. And yet, who created it? United. And you're getting the benefit of it. The whole basin is getting the benefit of it presently, not just the guys in the West-West. Everyone is. So our suggestion is that you do one of two things. You've seen them. Either give us a credit going forward for what we're paying to United to offset your fees, or it may be a better alternative for the basin as a whole, every grower, every landowner, to pay the United fees because they're getting the benefit from it. I guess I can't help but saying it, I've been on the board of Del Norte now for way too long, most people would say. But certainly since 1988, I've been operating there. Our water rates have gone from roughly $400 an acre foot to this year well over $800. 49% of our budget is non-operational costs, whether it's a GMA fee or a United fee or a water master fee. And I will say a little margin for the legal costs that it has, about 7%, to try to figure out what we have to do next and how much it's going to cost us. Those are my comments. Council Barbara Brenner would like to speak to the issue of well, to the issue generally, but also particularly to the issue of timeliness.
Thank you, John.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara Brenner. I'm a partner at White Brenner. I'm here on behalf of Del Norte Water Company, and a few of us have met before, but I always like to reintroduce myself. Hi.
Barbara.
I want to start with the timeliness. It's a very interesting to me, the way the judgment has been interpreted with regard to the mediation request. I don't know how you would do this. An assessment's not a basin management action, right? An assessment's a fee. It's an implication and you're applying a fee. The person that's supposed to pay that fee usually gets notice, right? So you get notice, and once you have notice, then you know whether you want to appeal the fee. That's the normal way that you would do it. That's the way the tax code has you do it. That's the way your property tax has you do it, right? It's not a basin management action. It's an imposition of a fee, a tax, right? So on December 15th, 2023, you adopted Resolution 2023-03 related to the basin assessment. March 5th, notice of the basin assessment is provided to the pumpers in the basin, including Del Norte. March 5th. April 6th, Del Norte pays 25% of that fee. That fee is $187,000 in plus that was due. April 18th, within 30, 40 days, certainly within 60 days of getting notice of the assessment, Del Norte submits protest of its April 6th payment of the basin assessment. I don't know how you would interpret the judgment any other way than to say the notice of the fee that you're appealing is what triggers your 60 days. And if there's some other way to interpret that, I welcome that interpretation. What's been explained to me, it's because it's a basin management action somehow that was taken in December that should have given Del Norte notice. They're supposed to appeal it and ask for a mediation. I don't find in the judgment. Your assessments in Section 7 has nothing to do with basin management actions, as you've said, in fact. You actually said earlier, your staff, that the 23 basin assessment doesn't have anything to do with basin management. It's all admin somehow. Okay, then how would Section 9 get triggered? So, again, June 30th, Del Norte pays another percentage of its basin assessment, all under protest. July 12th, Del Norte submits another letter based on silence from the GMA. We don't hear anything. We don't know what's happening. Send another letter. And then December 12th, 2024, another letter related to its protest, outlining its payments of the basin assessment through the last 4 installments. So each paid under protest. We're seeking a credit of that entire amount, or as Mr. Orr has indicated, the cost of the United fees on the West Las Posas Basin that Del Norte pays, and folks like Mr. Benoni pay be spread across the basin instead of just applied to certain pumpers. And the reason, as John indicated, or Mr. Orr indicated earlier, why that's equitable and allowed for under the judgment is because the basin's being treated as a whole. The judgment says we have to treat it as a whole. In the past, we've had management areas, the West Las Posas Basin, the East Las Posas Basin. So you didn't. You had management actions for each management area. Now we don't get to do that. You want us, the people in the West Las Posas Basin, to pay for all these studies and actions. But if you take a look at those and really study what they benefit the East Las Posas Basin. But we in the West have to pay for that because we're treating the basin as a whole. This is purely an equitable argument. And it's a decision that the judge has given to you, is the people that sit here in this neighborhood, to treat your neighbors equitably. You want to treat the basin as a whole, take a united fee that is significant, and that you benefit. The money that is paid to United. You sat there on that screen and you could see United, United, United. You benefited from the data, you benefited from the monitoring, you benefit from the modeling. The GSP, as we pointed out in letters, references United over and over and over. So how does that not benefit the basin as a whole? And you've asked to say, okay, well, 2023 is just admin. Well, that admin is for the basin as a whole. You used United data in part of that exercise in 2023, 2024. You're using it. You're using it today. You will continue to use it. Yes, there's some issues with the newest version of the model because of OP adjudication and litigation. I understand that. But you're still using it. And that's where the equity lies. And I just need clarification, whether it's today from County Council. Are we now suggesting that our administrative appeal process has passed, that we've lost an opportunity to mediate what should be a final decision finally from the water master? And I don't have any qualms with how long it's taken you, et cetera. You've got a lot on your plate. That's not my qualm here. But I do want to know what's the process here. What I consider a final decision is that I can go to mediation or to the court from is what you're going to decide today. And so I'd like to know from council or from the board, do I need, assuming that if I'm not reversed on the recommendation, I hope that you will take into consideration and give Del Norte credit, truly. But if you decide to deny, then what's my next step? What do I do as legal counsel for Del Norte? Do I ask you for a mediation? You say, oh no, that's come and gone. I like to know clearly, because then my next option is, of course, Judge Anderle. So, I just need to know so I don't get hit with this, oh, you failed to exhaust your administrative remedies, game. I don't want to keep wasting time and energy on this if I don't need to, right? I don't want to spend Del Norte's money unwisely. I know that many of you think that those lawyers are just spinning and spinning and spending money. I'm not one of them. So I do want to know a clear course, a clear administrative course, and I really implore you to take into consideration what's happening here. Del Norte and others in the west portion of the basin are paying for data, information, monitoring, replenishment. The replenishment that's going on goes into your it's your basin optimization yield. You're benefiting. The basin's benefiting. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the protest? Seeing none, is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the protest?
Chair West, Rob Grether, Vice Chair of the PAC, farmer in the Las Posas Valley, shareholder in Del Norte, and I didn't stand up fast enough to maybe get marked as speaking in support of the protest, but I would like to speak in support of the protest. I think that the points that Mr. Orr and Ms. Brenner have raised regarding the effort or the work that United does on modeling and replenishment already should be taken into consideration. And when the PAC took this up, we were wholly focused on replenishment projects and probably were focused on it too narrowly to recognize that. And I would request that at the very least today, you send this back to PAC for further consideration.
Thank you, Rob. Anyone else? All right. Fry, did you want to close? I guess you have the opportunity. Do you have anything further you wanted to add? You don't have to. It's just an invitation. It's not an obligation.
I love standing in front of your board, so I'll take this.
Get used to it. That's it.
I think when we use United for their modeling services, as we've done with the GSP, as we've done with the periodic evaluation, we contract with United for them to be able to do those services for us. And so everyone that's within the GMA boundaries are paying United for that service. I think that's the part that I just want to make.
Thank you. All right, returning to the board. Before we get there, let me, I guess first, I think a general reaction. I'm sensitive to the argument that Ms. Brenner made with respect to the assessment being different from basement management action, and I think that does bear on the timeliness of the application. For Del Norte, for Vanoni, it does not, because theirs was more than a year after that assessment was issued. So to the extent that timeliness is an issue, theirs is clearly outside whatever reasonable time might attach. And I'd also like to provide some context for section 7.9 of the judgment. Other than county council, I'm the only person in this room that was present when those terms were discussed and negotiated. And those terms were exclusively, and I say this without fear of contradiction, exclusively intended to apply, if at all, to the replenishment fees paid to United by those folks in West Las Posas that are paying you replenishment fees. It was never considered, never intended, never contemplated that it would apply to administrative costs. It was proposed in that context that the assessments be separated so that it would be clear that under the judgment there would be an assessment for administration and an assessment for replenishment, so that any subsequent discussions about credits or offset could be isolated and specific. That was rejected because of some considerations folks had about going back to their constituencies with 2 assessments as opposed to 1. But it was clear, and it was never intended otherwise, that Section 9 would apply to anything but replenishment fee assessments being paid to United. And it should equally be clear that none of the assessments approved or assessed by the watermaster apply at all to replenishment fees. They were all administrative charges. For that reason, it would be my recommendation to the board that Del Norte's protest be rejected on those grounds and on the non-duplication of fee grounds, and that the Vanoni's be rejected on those grounds and being untimely. That would, I'm curious to hear from the rest of the board, though.
I'll ask one question to County Council. County Council, do you see any problem with that argument?
With
With
the
what the
chair's,
chair
with the
just
chair's
stated.
conclusion? With the chair's conclusion, no, I don't.
Thank you.
So it seems to me, it seems to me that it seems to me that there is a disagreement in the interpretation of the language of the judgment. That's what I heard from counsel, and I've heard it from the chair. Here's my problem. My problem is that we're in the middle of an ongoing litigation with a entity that worked hard to create a ruling, and that ruling is in front of a judge, and I'm not sure, I'm fearful of this agency trying to interpret what the judge's intent and his wordings were, whether they fall in the category of counsel or they fall in the category of the GMA's counsel, and we get ourselves right back in front of the firing squad, and now we have more reason why this whole litigation process has been difficult for all of us. So the only thing that I have as a director is to listen to counsel and try to read the ruling as I read it, and I see a timeline. Now, the argument that I'm hearing is, well, that wasn't really the intent, blah, blah, blah. I don't know that. What I do know is that there is no upside for this agency to try to interpret what this judge did and what the words actually mean. Because I think that's another slippery slope where we just rack up legal bills that we shouldn't have to rack up. And I believe the solution to this problem is that there has to be an agreement between counsel and counsel or other parties of what this wording actually was, and not put it on the board to try to figure out a solution to maybe a ruling that was poorly written. I don't know. All I know is this. This agency has been sucked into litigation in 2 different areas of this county that are costing millions of dollars. On the Oxnard Plain, it's estimated that lawsuit alone will cost $125 million over 10 years. $125 million over the next 10 years. And I've heard that the cost of the litigation and Los Posas is somewhere in the $30 to $40 million. I do not want to spend any more money on this litigation process. So my recommendation is that if your argument is valid and the GMA's argument is invalid, or the GMA's argument is valid and your argument is invalid, the only avenue is that we have to go to the judge and ask for clarification what he meant by those paragraphs. And then we all have guidance. But I'm not keen on voting for an answer that solves this problem today that could come back and bite us with additional litigation. I don't know the answer to that. In fact, what I heard was, you also said, this is what you think the judge said. Tell me if it's wrong. Well, I believe that's your course of action, not to stand in front of this agency and have us pick winners and losers. We've done that, and we've been sued on that process. And I don't want to go down that road again. It's happening on the Oxnard Plain right now. And we are spending way too much money in this county on litigation over issues that should be back at the table negotiating a settlement, and we're not there. So I find it hard to support something that I believe could trigger even more litigation. And there is another alternative to it. Go to the court, ask them to tell us what it means.
See, I don't think that's necessary.
Okay,
The
there's
language
that.
of the language of the judgment says the water master may make adjustments. The question is, do we want to make an adjustment? Do we think an adjustment is called for at this time based on the nature of the assessment?
So in my experience in other GSAs, we have people that are in our GSAs that are United customers, and they also are in the basin for the GSA. And they have to pay another fee for the GSA implementation that has been put on us by DWR, which is Department of Water Resources. It's not something we asked for. We didn't ask to implement Sigma, but we are required to do that. And so that's what this fee is for the Fox Canyon. It's not a replenishment fee. It's not for all the other charges. If you look at the budget for United, that's all that stuff. I do have empathy on the fact that United is doing the modeling, but that's part of what we're working with to utilize for Fox Canyon's GSAs. So I don't see the duplication. I definitely haven't seen the United's budget where it shows that they're doing Fox Canyon modeling and they're charging all of their ratepayers for it. I think if you look at their budgets, you'll see what their charges are for. And I think it's not duplicated from what Fox Canyon is doing with the Water Master. And so if that's the case, show us that. But I don't see that our costs are crossovers. So with that, I do agree with Chair West on this. But I do have empathy that I saw the rates for what United is having to charge, and it's really expensive. And it's based on their own legal battles that are going on and implementations of huge projects that have to be done now. And if there's any help to reduce those costs, let's write those letters of support. But, I have empathy for this. However, we have to treat all ratepayers in the same way. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else? Michael?
Just to muddy the water a little bit, I definitely agree with the other directors who said. I would just say that I also am sympathetic to the noticing request that, if the basin assessment was noticed in March and Del Norte submitted a complaint in April, I think that if there is language in the judgment that provides for mediation, that they should have that opportunity.
So question, I guess, is there a motion concerning the disposition of the protests?
So the motion would be to deny the Del Norte Water Company and the Vioni Group protest and request for.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion's carried. With that, we will recess to close session.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
And that's in regards to what was asked. The disputing party must request mediation within 60 days. Is that 60 days from this decision of today? Or how is that being understood by council? Do they have a time to mediate? Because I do believe this is a new process. We make
And I think
issues.
that's a fair descriptor here, which is that, we're learning as we're flying the plane, so to speak, or constructing the plane as it's being flown.
Yes.
My recommendation is to go ahead and proceed expeditiously to request mediation. The board will take up the determination of whether or not we're interested. That's all. I wouldn't delay.
No, I'm not delaying. I'm just asking. So they have 60 days now to mediate or to request mediation?
In order to file, or in order to seek judicial review, there must be a request for mediation, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. We will recess to close session, return hopefully at the near term. And I don't think, are we going to be able to adjourn from closed session? I don't think there's going to be a portable action in closed session.
Correct, we'll be able to adjourn, but I just wanted to give Director Perella the opportunity to just make his announcement regarding recusal.
Also, before we do recess to closed session, is there anybody who wishes to address the board with respect to those matters that were noticed for closed session? Hearing none, we're in recess.
I'm recusing myself from the matter of the city of Oxnard only, the other two not.
I never know what's actually going to be in the closed session, so it's just, they put everything down, but not